Welcome to another episode of the Information Addicts Podcast. My name's Cassidy. I'm an information addict, and this is my podcast where I explore what it means to consume information more responsibly. Today, I have a conversation with my friend Manuel. I originally met Manuel through online interactions, through Bridges of Meaning Discord, but have been lucky enough to be able to meet with him several times in person as we both live in the Netherlands. Manuel always strikes me as one of the people who has changed and been transformed the most through whatever this online thing is we're doing. And so it's always lovely to talk with him and be challenged by him and continue to see the way that he's changing and growing. For this conversation, he wanted to talk about male and female dynamics and the way that affects us in community and relationships. And I found it a really interesting topic because it's something that I have been trying to get my head around and understand how do I understand those things well. So it was really lovely to have that back and forth and hear his challenges and understand how he's coming at the questions. So I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do too. Manuel, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. We've had lovely conversations online, and you're and in person, but you're kind of online and in Discord, so people might know you. But for those who don't, why don't you just give an explanation of who you are? How'd you kind of get into estuary? And I might ask you some questions before we jump into the main conversation.
Yeah, so I was depressed, and I ended up watching Jordan Peterson and then Paul van der Klee, and then I was like, I want to talk about this stuff. Like, why are we in the comment section? And so I wanted to start a Discord server, and that was at the same time that Joey was starting the Discord server. So I made one, and Joey made one, and nobody showed up for mine, and everybody went to Joey's. So that was great. But I was one of the early birds in his server too.
Yeah.
And I hung out there for like a year or a year and a half, and like nothing was happening. And then at a certain point, it started lifting off. And then we had this gang going effectively. We went to the Portal server, we went to the Verveki server, and at a certain point I started participating in the meditation on the Verveki server, and I started hanging there because it was more, it was actually doing a project, right? Like, it was actually trying to achieve something. It was trying to take Verveki's work and
do something with
and
it.
take it further, right, and make it practical.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a bunch of responsibilities in leading the meditation and stuff like that, and that was good for me, and that helped me get out of my depression. And so and then the estuary thing started. We went to the festival first time, right, and that was when it started getting feet on the ground. And I actually wasn't that into it. I've seen a lot of issues, well, on the Verveki server with how practices are run, and well, my main objection to estuaries is that it's too unguided, unstructured. And I think everything needs to participate in a purpose, and I think that it wasn't doing that, and that's still my objection. I do agree with the spirit, right? I agree with this idea that something needs to be facilitated and provided to people so that they can slowly get out of their shell, and like Van der Klee calls it an on-ramp, right? So they get an on-ramp. Well, I would maybe say it's more of an off-ramp, right? Like it's an off-ramp out of their life into something.
At least what we do. I wouldn't say that all of it is probably an off-ramp. If it's kind of the hybrid, you're kind of on-ramping and off-ramping at the same time. But yeah, I think the in-person stuff is much more, at least at the end of the day, an off-ramp.
Yeah, and so we last time we met was on the festival that you organized, which was really cozy.
Manuel, I think you're one of the rare people who've been to all three. of the
I
festivals.
am a rare breed.
Yes. We appreciate your patronage.
um so yeah, like and I think all of this, if you zoom out a little bit, it's like, okay, like we we lost what it means to be together. we,
Mm,
we, we, we we lost how to do that, and we're trying to reclaim it in an era where, in some sense, a lot of people are like chained to the internet way too much.
yeah. Myself included, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Mm,
and so yeah, like that's kind of also where I wanted to go with my conversation. It's like the relationships are broken.
mhm,
And I've well, I've been dating, and like I've been running into a lot of women, and I'm like they're so they're so disconnected, and they're so self unaware, but they're also really aware in other ways, right? Like it's like
mhm,
um what is it? They're trying to find themselves, but they're using the wrong tools, right?
mhm,
And then you get it. Well, I call it an abomination. Like they're formed in an image which yeah, sometimes it's actually horrible. Like I don't want to talk about my experiences, but I can tell you that it's bad. um so yeah, so like the thing I've been getting into is, well, there's a feminine approach to things, and there's a masculine approach, and you can see the masculine as more um, participatory in some sense. It's like doing.
mhm,
In some sense, it that can be forceful. In other senses, it can be guiding. Um, and then the feminine is more feeling. It's more intuitive, right? Like it's it's guided by sense in some important way. And
mhm,
yeah, like if that sense is misattuned, right, then you get into a really weird place. Or if the woman has been hurt or whatever in the past, right, like if there's a lot of suspicion behind it, right, like
mhm,
all of that is used to find the threat, right? Like all of this
mhm,
machinery is yeah, organized in a way that's not serving the woman and the relationship as well. um and then, well, like I guess I can make it a little bit personal, right? Like, so I see my personal reaction to that, right? Like like first I obviously let things be a little bit, and then at a certain point it's like I feel like I want to assert authority, right? But then, well, like at a
yeah.
certain, like it's enough, right? Like
Yeah, and well, I laugh because it's very you. I believe you that that's how you respond.
yes, yeah, well, but like I genuinely fear that, like, that's the only response, and else there's no response, right? Like else you don't have a thing. Like that's
Mm.
the implication that I have. So anyway, like yeah, maybe you want to give a reaction so far.
Yeah, I mean, the masculine and the feminine are interesting. I would still say I don't have a full sense and grasp of what we even mean by those words, but it's slowly starting to kind of um, take some sort of shape in my mind. I had a conversation with Sherry a while back where she talked about the masculine of being very similar to how you described it, where it was kind of doing and kind of um, moving through. And she described the feminine as sort of opening up and receiving in. And there's something about that that resonates true to me. And I think you need both in healthy communities and healthy ways. But I do think we've kind of lost sense of how do we do that well, especially in a world where we have so little connection to tradition and where it came from, and we have this sort of instinct that we need to rewrite tradition and traditional roles to make things better. And I think over time, well, I think I've always been a little bit this way because I have a natural kind of conservatism in my personality, but over time, kind of realizing, oh, I think maybe we're missing something. Um, but yeah, I mean, talk a little bit more about this dynamic you're seeing and kind of what questions you have. Because yeah, I would love to kind of get more in depth of where it is you have confusion about what's going on and like how
So
you're trying to manage these dynamics.
yeah, so first of all, like I've been really attracted to Asian shows, and I'm now watching a show where they're talking. Well, it's about the union of the Chinese Empire and under one emperor,
Mm,
and you can see the honor culture, the law, the masculinity, right?
mhm.
Like it's like I'd rather die than be insulted, basically, right? Like so there's a complete perversion of it, right?
Mhm,
But there's also a beauty in it where uh, they can do things that we can't do anymore. Like I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about multinationals, right? And like multinationals don't have loyalty to their country anymore. And I'm like, oh yes, like
mm,
yes, they don't have loyalty to a country, right? So this whole idea of loyalty, right? All of these things they've been watered down, right? Like this the new generation of people, they're world citizens, right? Like they don't
mhm,
consider themselves bound to a country, and that's why they also don't see migration as big a problem, right? Because they're like, no, like that's just people moving around, and that's how the world is now. And like I had this conversation with these two Italian students here, right? And it was just completely normal that they could study here for half a year, right? Like it
mhm,
wasn't even a question that like that was possible or something, right? And then they get a room, right? That like they have a room while there's like distinct lack of rooms for students in the Netherlands, and like they get to come from Italy and they get a room, and I'm like, yeah, like
mhm,
that's actually it's not okay, but but you've
mm,
been like you're living under this assumption that like this is the way things work, and so yeah, like I think there's a taking for granted of structures,
mhm,
that's been really profound in the West, and I think actually like the reason that the West is supporting Ukraine so much is because they want to protect that, right? Like that's literally what the fight is for, right? Like okay, like there's this order, and we need to protect this order because if we give in there, then we basically give up our claim to that order, and then a new order needs to be established, right? Like so I actually think like the West order is fighting for its dying breath in Ukraine, but not to get onto that too much, but I think it's important to see that there's all of these forces moving behind, right? And like
mhm,
that basically the masculine side, and like the masculine side has been taken for granted, right? And then within that there's the liberation, right? Like the liberal thought is using the established order to be free, right? And like you see in the 60s you had the sexual liberation, right? Like in the
mhm,
like you get a progressive liberation, um and in that progressive liberation the feminine, right? Like it's basically it like I see the feminine is connected to bring birthing, right? Or to generate or
mhm,
to cultivate in a sense, right? Or to grow up, right? Like to raise as a baby, right? Not as a child, but as a level of a baby where you're basically supplying everything, and it's all emergence, right? Or at least it's focused on emergence, right? And so this idea of queer, right, is basically worshiping emergence, right? Like, oh, you have this thing come up in you, right? Like that's the sacred thing. Like we need to keep the sacred thing, and we need to all appreciate it, right? Like that's basically the movement that they're making, right? So it's inherently it's worshiping Mother Nature, right? But like not even nature, but like Mother inner nature or something at this point, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the extremes, right? So
Mhm.
like I don't want to deal with the extremes because then we get into crazy discussions. But within that, right, there's a normalization, right? So
Mhm.
so so there, if you use the Overton window, right, like the maybe a better way to think about it is your sense making is connecting to certain things, right? And some things stand out and other things don't stand out, right? And like what stands out? Well, the things that are not normal, right? And it's not
Mhm.
normal as in being the norm, but normal in the sense of what you get bombarded with all the time, right? And
Mhm.
and, and so we've been bombarded with more and more extreme ideas, right, about individual freedom, right? Like all of these ideas have been really propagated. And I think the feminine is in some sense in rebellion, right? Uh, Maybe because the masculine isn't healthy, right? Or maybe because the masculine isn't asserted itself, or like maybe that's the same thing, right? Um, and I think the masculine also doesn't know how to assert itself anymore. Like I'm actually struggling with that because if there's no norm of of how authority is manifest, right? Like in China in around the year zero, right? Like there was an obvious way in which the law worked, and everybody couldn't even conceive of breaking the law, right? Like that was so far out of their imagination that they rather die than doing that. And so now it's like the opposite, right? Like like now in some sense it's like living under the law is so far out of our imagination that you'd rather die than obeying the law, because like why would someone else be allowed to impose the law upon
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a complicated relationship where I think we have a false sense of both masculinity and femininity. I don't think either of them are really in healthy places. Um, and in some ways, there's like this subversion happening where um, women taking on the masculine role is seen as beautiful, but not seen as beautiful when a man takes that on, and vice versa. That kind of gets to some of this sort of like girl boss feminism versus like the queerness, where it's like all of a sudden where these things that were, let's say, traditionally masculine or feminine, when put on the other gender, all of a sudden is empowering. And yeah, and it becomes this battle cry. And I don't know. There's a certain recognition to why it's happening in my mind, where it's like I understand it. I don't. I agree with you. I don't think it's fully healthy. I don't always know exactly how to articulate it, but you just kind of there's certain things you can see, and you kind of puts a question mark in the process of those things. And I think part of that too is this recognition that there is, as much as there is certain truths about the masculine and feminine, there's also a certain level of diversity and outliers within that. And we don't have a good story of how to incorporate them all together and how to move into a oneness that isn't celebrating multiplicity, but really kind of like cohesion. Um, and like for me, I think the church is answering a lot of those questions on both why it is that there's this confusion, but also how do we undo the confusion? Because you look at some of these things like say example for like the foreigners. I am one of the people you hate. I am a an expat living in a country I am not from. um, and I think there is I've done a lot of traveling, and I think there is value to it. But because I've done a lot of traveling, I also recognize the value of staying in place and growing roots and never leaving um, for much longer than a week. And some people never leave their place anywhere. That's not quite as likely anymore. But yeah, there's that level at which um, there's that kind of beauty to understanding a culture and celebrating the beauty about it. And every culture has sort of its quirkiness. And I think we're all trying to use that to um, understand what it is to be human and how that shapes our cultures. But like some of this kind of uh, love for immigration, I do think comes from the Bible, where it's like we're supposed to take in the sojourner. We're supposed to care for the sojourner. But how do we do that, and what does it mean to love the sojourner, and in that proper orientation? Like if you go too far into the extreme, you lose what it is to even be um, a native person. You know what I mean? Like at some point when it becomes so, you get so lost in what it is to have a cultural identity and practice that's shaped by the people. Um, yeah, everybody's a stranger in their own land.
Well, there's two things happening, right? So yes, the external is coming in, right? But our attention, right? Like I'm talking to you. Well, you're in the Netherlands now, but
Yeah.
like I'm my attention is out, right?
Hmm.
Like it's not aimed at my direct environment. It's like so there's two forces there, right? Like there's the whole that's disintegrating, and then there's the outside that's just plumping it up and like making it more confused, right? And
Hmm.
I think when we're talking about taking in the external, right? Like there's an appropriate level, and like you
Yeah.
don't eat poison, right? Like that's just not a thing that you do because poison kills you, right? So there's in the thing that you take in, you need to judge, right? Like you need to judge whether what you take in is actually going to be healthy, or if it's a detriment. Like yeah, sometimes you're just hungry and you eat crappy food, right? But you still don't eat poison, right? Or like you still don't drink seawater when you're at sea, and you're like thirsty, right? Like because you know
Hmm.
that's going to mess you up even worse, right? Anyway, so um to go back to the masculine feminine idea, right? Like I think the individualism uh, is probably harder on women. Like it kind of has to be. I think men, in some sense, have a tendency towards individualism anyway, unless they're in a proper hierarchy, right? But like they're not as networky as women, right? Like I think women
Generally, yeah.
women they thrive more in yeah in the flow, while men thrive more in making things work correctly or something, right? And well and that's the conflict, right? So like I've had many conflicts on the awakening from the meaning crisis server, where there was like basically two spirits that were battling. Like one is a spirit of giving comfort, right, and the other one is the spirit of making progress. And like we saw that in the second breakwater festival, right? Like we kind of saw these two spirits popping out as well, right? It's like one
Hmm.
is like I want to know about you, and the other one is let's get to the next stage, right? Like let's get to the next step, like and and both need to happen, right? Like
Hmm.
you can't get to the next step without taking care of all the parts, right? That need to be unified, right? because that's stupid, because then you don't have cohesion. But you can't have cohesion without a telos, right? Because then that's fictional. And that's been my frustration, right? So if you see, look at what happened with the Olympics with the Feast of Dionysus, right? Like I remember going to parties, right? Like you had plenty of different people, like they're not even comparable in where they're coming from, and they had a good time together. And it's like, oh, that means that we can all have a good time together. Yes, if we come together to a special place to party, then we can have a good time together. But then when we have to live life, now there's different impositions upon us, and things are different. And maybe then we can't get along, or probably, right? Like and so there's this illusion that, oh yeah, if I just go through life happy go lucky and there's no stakes, right? Because like I there's nothing at stake for me, then we can all get along. But that's not reality. Like we don't live in a place that we can all always get along.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I think part of it though is the striving for understanding, and yeah, it's like learning the dance, right? Because you're right, we need both. We need the place where it can move forward and make progress. But we also need the place where we can stop and learn about each other so that when we go and move and make the process and things get a little dicey, you can go back to this place of like, okay, how do we build this trust? And I don't think we have a really good dance with that. I think a lot of it is because we're in this sort of we're very often primed to be in this culture war mindset where we are looking for one sort of gender ideology frame to win over another. And it's just not very helpful in understanding the real complexities of what's actually going on, because there's a bit of truth in both extremes, but there's enough flawed in both of them that it makes it, I think, unappealing for most people who don't really want to be in that activist mindset, who are really like genuinely trying to ask questions. It just really gets confusing. Um, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
no, like it does make sense. But like uh,
Let me hear the but, Manuel.
well, like so what you're advocating for is like a middle position, right?
um, no, I don't think so. I because I don't actually think I'm very moderate in the sense that I'm like right in the middle, cut everything through.
Hmm.
Some might call me a moderate because I don't conform to the caricature of one side or another would expect. But and sure, I can accept that definition if that's what you want to call it. But I don't, I don't think that I am personally particularly a moderate. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah. I want to like okay, like let's get out of the definition thing. Like how do you
sure,
want to personally resolve it then for yourself? I guess like what's the path that you take?
uh, become orthodox.
Well,
That's
okay. What is the orthodox answer, right? Like it because
mm,
let me say how I see the answer, right? Like I see the answers. You need to have the ideal, right?
mhm, mhm,
So like and the ideal is extreme, right? Because it's perfection.
mhm,
It has to be extreme, and we suck, right? Like we're all muppets, and we can't live up to the ideal, and like that's fine as long as we recognize the ideal and the fact that we're sinful and that we strive
mhm,
to get closer towards it. And at some level it doesn't even matter whether we attain that getting closer as long as we attain that orientation of getting closer, right? And that's that's the thing that's ticking me off with these, well, not only the queer people but like everybody, like mainly women, is is they they want to avoid the judgment of the ideal.
Yes, I think that is true. Um, but I don't think that instinct is altogether wrong. But I do think sometimes it's wrongly oriented. Let me try to see if I can figure out what I mean by that. um, so I went to New York last year, or no, 2 years ago now, and I was walking around Rockefeller Center because I I am in entertainment, and so when in New York, you must go to TV Mecca. Um, but I was walking through the buildings, and I was trying to get into one building to see some murals some guy had told me about in the Rockefeller Center. But I had to go through some of the exterior buildings, and I went through this weird building that was kind of um, wasn't very like beautifully designed. It had some weird like mechanic um, mechanism art piece going on. I didn't fully understand it, but it was like interesting enough. But on the wall across from it was this like sort of these statues. One was of a man on a horse, I think. Another was like a woman. And then there was like a little bird in the middle of it. And I was talking to this guy in the lobby, and I got his email address and I lost it. I wish I hadn't lost it because I really wanted to talk to him on the podcast about this. But he was really explaining to me this art piece where he was like, okay, so you see the man and the woman, and they're both looking at this bird. And, I think actually the man had like a bow and arrow or something. And he kind of described it as like the man sees the bird and he sees danger. And the woman sees the bird and she sees beauty. And so now you have this clash of like, what does the man and the woman do? Well, if the man kills the bird, the woman's gonna be really mad because she killed the beautiful bird. But there's this sort of this level of like this tension of like that masculine instinct to see the danger.
Or
Um,
the foods, like
or food, yes, or food or provision, exactly. But that masculine instinct is very true and good. But there are something also very true and good about this sense of beauty. But again, you have to have them rightly oriented, and there has to be this sort of like mutual submission to each other to really figure out how to do that well. And it will come with conflict, because when you have two things that are other and try to make them one, they will change each other, and that comes with that comes with a lot of complications. Merge.
yeah, like I was a little bit when I heard the word conflict, I was like, what? Because like, yes, it's complications, right? But the conflict is a consequence of your willingness to put the higher, right?
Sure, yes, I agree. But
and
then
and
there's this conflict within us where we recognize, as much as we see the ideal and we strive towards it, we also fail to be that, and sometimes we misunderstand the ideal because of our framing. And
yeah, that's
so
the problem.
you hold this idea of the ideal so tightly in your head. This is what is the ideal, that it sometimes clashes with this other sense of like the instinct of let's say the man and the woman of like coming together. And if no one's willing to kind of budge and have that like um, sense of like complication of the understanding, it will lead to conflict. And that conflict is not necessarily unredeemable. It's painful. Um, but I think it's very complicated, but I think you're right. It's like if we really get a seriousness about putting our minds to the higher order, um, you learn to, even in your stubborn drive towards the ideal, be willing to admit I might not, I might be missing something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. So there's you're talking about the sense of perception, right? And yes, like
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you're at, right? Like you might be really severely misguided, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then instead of being righteous, you end up being self-righteous, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because you're pursuing what you want and
Yeah.
not what the higher is, right? And like that's where you have surrender. But
Mm-hmm.
like what do you surrender to, right? Like that is a really a big problem. And like for women, right? Like I I'm going to be blunt, but like they're more in the cycles, right? So the perspective that they have is really a consequence of the weather of the day, effectively, right? And
Depends on the woman.
well, yeah, well, just
Depends on the woman. But
maybe I'd be willing to see
getting us
what
into
you have in your
tricky.
head.
You're getting us into tricky territory, Manuel. How are we gonna?
But I don't really care about it. But the point is that, like, at least what I've been seeing in women, right, is that they flip, like, sometimes 180 degrees in the way that they approach it, right? Like, depending on whether they see something as an imposition, or whether they're basically enchanted by it, right? Like, where they willingly go along with it, right? And it's like, yes, because, like, if you willingly go along with something and it doesn't provide to you what you're looking for, like, I can obviously, I can see that flip, right? Like, I can see that. But that's why you lose consistency. Like at that point, like, you're a puppet in the wind. And it's like, you, well,
Mm. No, I see. I see how you can see it that way. Like I totally understand that. Um, I mean, I think this kind of comes to this clash of like if the masculine is rigid and structure, at some point women do have to be fluidity because structure against structure, you know, that's gonna
mhm.
something eventually is going to collapse. There's certain level where I think the role of women is to learn how to be more fluid. Now, in that, I think sometimes women think that means um, so open-minded that you can't stand for anything. I think that's wrong-headed. I think as women we have to have strong constitutions because if you're going to be the fluid part of this uh, dance, you better have a strong confidence of where you can move because it's a much more dangerous place to be in than strong, steady in one direction.
No, like, yeah, like I had this insight a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking about women. I'm like, wait, like, this is their position, or like, I'm so glad I'm not there. Like, that's that sounds horrible, but so like you got my sympathies there. But and I no, but I actually think, right, like, that in order to properly do that, you need to have a safe space, right? Like, the man needs to provide the space that you can be fluid in, so that you don't spill over effectively, right? And
You know,
or
that's interesting because I think safety is not always what we need. We need a good space. We need a true space. Because women are pretty um they're pretty adaptable. I mean
Mhm.
I mean we because of some of our limitations physically, we're not in a world that's safe for us. I say this all the time. Um, I know that any man on the street, if they wanted to, they could take me down, no problem. Absolutely no problem. And I couldn't do anything about it, And that's, um, that alone is kind of a terrifying thought, except for the fact that I don't live in a society that is not um, fully fully debased, or am I saying that right? I don't live in a society that's just full on corruption, that I can't walk outside and feel safe, because there's good and true men who are going to stand up and be there for us. And in that way, it creates a certain safety, but it's still a little unsafe. You have to, it's like that scene in one of the Narnia books where Aslan is at the water and Susan asks him, like, are you safe? And he says, no,
Hmm.
I'm not safe, but I'm good. And that's what it's like to be a woman. The world is not safe for us.
Well, it is. There's
Thankfully,
different levels of safe, and I think you
yes,
highlighted that as well, right? So like when I dance with you, right? Like I might step on your toes, right? Like
you
it's
might
like
drop
that's
me. Who knows?
right, or that, yes, exactly, right? So that's not a level of safety that I can provide, right?
Mhm,
But I can provide the safety that I will be responsible when that happens,
mhm.
right? That's the level of safety that does exist, and that's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
But then the question is like, how do you get there, right? Because like
Mm.
if you look at like how a lot of relationships go, at least from my perspective, right? It's like um, in some sense it's propositional, right? Like let's go do this, right? And there's not an attention to cultivate this union, right? Like that's not where the focus is, or like there's not even an understanding of what it would mean to to participate on that level. And um what happens, and like this is one of my criticisms on Paul van der Klee, right? Because he's basically saying, well, you need to start with an hour of rapport or something in your interview videos, and like for me that's bullshit, right? Like I'll just jump in straight ahead, like like I am in that security, right? And I have faith that if you live in that security, you don't need all the dancing stuff, right? And like I think the dancing stuff only matters if that safety, right, that I'm talking about, right, like that things will go right, isn't there. That sense of safety, right? Like it's like whether it's actually there or not is at some level irrelevant, right? Like it's the confidence um in your participation that guides it. And I think there's even something more, and like I don't know how far this goes for women, but like it goes for me. It's like even if it goes wrong, right? So like even if you do drop me and don't take responsibility, I'm still fine. So I don't care.
Yeah. I think I think the problem is there have been certain people who have been dropped and they don't feel fine at all. And so how do you recover from that? That's a hard one. And I think that's where the feminine, um, this feminine energy of like creating the space and like receiving in and loving the sojourner of sorts, um, creates a place that rebuilds and heals that space to you, to where you can get to a place where um,
Right.
you
which
can
which
have,
is the same thing as raising a baby.
yeah. Well, and like that's the thing, I think motherhood is one of the most noble callings a woman can have. Not that every woman should be a mother. That's not my claim. But I think it is an incredibly noble calling. And it is
Maybe they all should be a mother, just not a biological one.
maybe so. In the same way, I suppose all men should be fathers
Yeah.
of sorts. Um, what was I saying? Oh, but yeah, parenthood in any form is not a safe endeavor at all. And in fact, it makes you much more vulnerable. And you have to work extra hard to create a security for your children to make it feel as though it's safe, even though it's not really that safe. And yeah, I think we live in a world of like a lot of battered and broken men and women who have been hurt by each other, across the divide and within the divide. So men hurting men, women hurting women, and then men and women hurting each other. And then there's all these stories um, telling us what it is a man and woman should be that don't actually get at the heart of what men and women really want, which is love, security, beauty, truth, goodness. Um, but they get they get picked apart because we've lost sense of where they come from. We've lost sense of how they move us, and we think they're outdated and not worth contending with. And so we just think, oh, let's change it. And I don't want to be too hard on that instinct because um, you can, like, we're modern people, we can understand it. But I do agree with you. I think that instinct is a dangerous one. I think we should have a little more caution before we just go changing things. And I think we do. I think we should have a little more caution in the narratives that we're ingesting and believing. I think especially women, because I think we are more
Yeah.
prone to being drawn into story
Well,
because of that
like,
sense of beauty that.
well, not only the sense of beauty, but it's also this like it's the sense of safety as well, right?
Yeah.
Because like just imagine, right? Like you have a man, right? Like, and like he can do with you what you want, right? And it's like, well, how do I explain my situation to myself, right? Because you could say, well, he's just using me to get what he wants, and like, or you could say, yes, this man is actually providing me with protection, and in that awesomeness, I can lose myself or something, right?
Yeah. And it's hard to know. It's hard to discern sometimes what's that difference because there are plenty of men who come off as chivalrous who actually have their own not so great intentions. And then vice versa. Someone who can seem very gruff and unamenable and unappealing, yet has this um, real sense of protection and duty that that is that is admirable. But yeah, we've kind of lost the plot, and you see the way that it understandably turned, but then you kind of, if you keep digging, you understand we are trading one kind of submission for another. So instead of women finding some sort of submission in marriage and learning what that is and finding a life partner and dealing with the ups and downs that comes with um, love and dealing with another person who's very different than you, we've decided we are going to be young, independent women. A story
With a
that's actually
career.
been with a career, a story that's actually been sold as a value for men for years and years and years. And we think, well, why can't that be good for women too? So we buy into it. We get meaning from it. We do get meaning from work because women are not meant to not work. I don't think I don't think that's it at all. Yet, what we've done is now took the submission of a man who loves us and put our lives in submission to a corporation that maybe they care about us a little bit, but most of them are looking for the bottom
Well,
line.
they'll build you a Google city.
But it's a tenuous thing, and but it all stems from pain, where um, women feel like they've been shut down, rejected, and used by men. And I think men feel like they have been underappreciated by women.
Well, like let's go back to these enemy versus savior perspective
Mhm.
of the woman, right? Because like I've been experiencing this, right? So like you get put in a savior perspective, right? And then everything's possible, right? Like sky is the
Mhm.
limit.
Mhm.
And then you get put in the enemy perspective and you can't do anything right.
Mhm.
Like there's
Yeah.
nothing that you can do right. And that's the issue, right? It's like because like I don't know how to deal with that. Like it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in some sense, if you have a relationship, right, like you well, you can just wait till the storm settles, right? Or maybe you can appeal to something, like if you're lucky, right? It's like, okay, like can we get out of this so that we can get back to being in a relationship? But if if that person i- is alien to you, right? Like for
Mhm.
example on Twitter or on the street, I don't like I I don't know what you can do.
I think all you can do is try to be the best version of the ideal that you see as you can, and you're totally going to fail. But like if you keep trying to find that true good
Yeah, but
beautiful version of the
what's
ideal,
the ideal?
for men or for women.
No, no, like if you are villainized, right? What's the ideal, right? Like I can give you the answer that comes up in my head. Like
Okay.
you gotta walk away, like you gotta run. Like that's I like beyond that.
Possibly, possibly the only answer is to walk away. But I think another answer is to stand firm and say, I'm not walking away, but this is it. You can walk, you can not, but that's it. Because that's what marriage is, right? It's two
Mhm,
people saying, we are flawed. We are moving towards an impossible mission, especially on our own. But I will not walk away. And you really, really hope that that other person doesn't bail. And to take this back to sort of the dancing metaphor, that's what you need if you're going to do the dance well. The woman needs to commit and trust and not bail. And the man has to stand firm and hold his strength as best as he can. Now, sometimes you're going to fail. You're going to let your emotions get in the way, and you're gonna stall out, or the man is gonna have some lack of his body and he's gonna fall. But when those things happen, there's this trust that has been built over time that realizes it wasn't malicious. And that's what I think we need to kind of realize too, is like, is our actions malicious? Because sometimes they are. And that's like the hardest thing to root out, where it's like, I'm being malicious because I want my own way. Oh, that's awful. Like you just hate it. And but you do it. And you're like tempted to it all the time. And then when you have that person that stands there and says, I'm not leaving. I don't care if you scream and shout and, call me names. I'm here. I'm going to love you. It might not be the way that you imagine it should be, but that's it.
mhm.
But running, I think there's two options. And I think this is especially true. Um, I think for me, in the frame of orthodoxy and what I'm learning, there is monasticism that is pointed towards the service of others at the expense of yourself,
Mhm,
or there is committed marriage that is also pointed to the service of others in spite of yourself.
mhm.
And those manifest themselves in two different ways, but they're two ways that teach us what it is to be human. They're two equal paths, different paths that ask us different things.
Why
But
do you use the word equal? Like this is interesting because like now I'm just like this is one of these feminine things. It's like why are you? What's this need for equality? Like there are two paths. Like that's it, two paths.
well, I did. I'm not trying to remember exactly what I said. If I said equal, what I meant was, um, it's
Worthwhile.
one path is not inherently better than another. Each individual is called to a different path, and to take the wrong path when you're not called to it could lead to your destruction. But both of them can lead to salvation and understanding what it is to be truly human. And I say that
They're both
because,
valid, but
yes,
but
that's what I mean. They're both,
do you get my objection? Because like I've had this, I had this conversation with a lot of women, right? Like all men are equal, or like what are you talking about? We're not equal. Like that's not true.
well, yeah, again, it's like words fudge, right? What do we mean by equality? Do we mean that they all have the same abilities and functions and should fill the same roles? No, but like they have the same dignity, and they have they have a role that's important, even if it's overlooked. And that's where I think that, yeah, the equality question gets difficult because women, they want equality with men, but they're not really seeking equality generally when we're talking in sort of this political sense. They're really looking for the inverse of like the power dynamic of the women in
Right.
power over the men.
Because there can't be equality because we're different. Like it's like
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. I think as an artist, to me, there's this different sense. It's not linear, but it's
I,
symmetrical, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, right?
Mhm.
But like like I don't have an objection that everybody has their place and that everybody has their value and that they all are
Yeah.
necessary. But like fine, like but why would you use equal to describe that? Like that's where I'm like, no. Like
Mm.
like the screen on my computer is not equal to the processor. Like it's completely different. But I need both because else I can't use my computer.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to think more about that to have a good answer. Um, and in a way that would probably make sense to you and what I mean. Because I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with that.
But
But there
like
might be
are you
something,
am I not
it,
touching on the thing that you want to with like is there something beyond what I said that you want to highlight?
um, about monasticism and marriage,
No. I mean about the equality, right? That
equality.
you're
Yeah,
trying to point at something else than I'm describing.
not that I feel like needs clarification for the conversation to continue. I have the sense that there's something we're missing each other on, but
Mhm.
I wouldn't know, and
No,
I
but I
don't.
think that's the interesting bit. Like I think that's actually the essence where the conversation is drawing upon, right? So
Yeah.
because effectively what you're saying is like I'm not fully recognizing you in that I'm not recognizing your position in some sense, right? Which might be actually true, right? Like I'm not even saying that that's wrong,
Mhm.
but that being misunderstood is a justification for putting well like disqualifying me in some way, right? It's like okay, like he's never going to understand me or something, right? Or like
Mhm.
everything that I say isn't having the effect that I want and therefore it's futile or something, like he's never going to understand, right?
Yeah, well, that's certainly the extreme of it. I don't think it has to be that way.
No,
And I
I
think
agree.
women like to understand and be understood, and so
Mhm.
and we're little fluid creatures. We're like we try to um, figure out, okay, this angle didn't work, maybe this, and I don't think that's to invalidate you. It shouldn't be. At the best, it shouldn't be to invalidate each other, but it's to better understand the other and learn how to be better for them. That's what it should be. And that's where I get sort of discouraged with some of these feminism conversations or even diversity conversations. I think um, diversity is natural. I
Mhm.
think it's a good thing. I think the way we try to approach that is misguided often because it's not really about um, seeing the best in others and what they have and appreciating that. It's yeah, it's sort of trying to either eliminate the diversity altogether, where it's like, oh, we're all just one, but it's like, no, the distinctions matter.
Mm.
But yeah, there's something deeper going on, and I think often it becomes, yeah, the sense of like, and I don't know, maybe I miss some of this because I don't know my cultural heritage. I know my mom's part Irish, and my dad has no idea what he is, but kind of outside of that, I don't really know. And so all my life, I've been asked, "What are you? What are you?" Because I'm a little bit
That's
racially
really
ambiguous.
American, by the way.
Yeah, yes, yes, it is
No,
very
no, but like I
American.
think it's actually toxic. But what, like,
You know, I think it's I think it's well intended because there's this level of which, because we are this melting pot, we're trying to find grounding in culture.
hmm
And so we move to we have this natural instinct to move to our family trees. Yeah, but then all of a sudden it
that
becomes
that's
this sort of
that's
power.
a reaction to the domicile, right? Because if you don't feel a sense of domicile, which like we've concluded is actually a lack of a spiritual home, it's like if you don't have a spiritual home, you're gonna look for the home
Yeah.
in the material, and but I don't
Mhm.
think that's a good thing. Like I think that's a symptom of a bad thing.
Well, I don't know. I wonder if that instinct a little bit tends toward Gnosticism, because there is something true about the material being good and beautiful in a Christian frame.
Yes, yes, but the digging it up, right? Like I agree. If you have a home with a nice tradition that you've imported from Europe, right? Like you should cherish that. Like nothing against that. But if you don't have that tradition and you're gonna dig it up, right? Because like what your parents didn't give it to you, like what are you doing, right? Like and
Yeah,
and and, and what are you going to do a DNA test and then based upon the numbers that you get out of the DNA test, you're like, well, now I'm going to be an Irish like
well, I
descendant.
don't have plans to do that, but like I don't know. I kind of understand the instinct of it,
Yeah,
because there's
I
this
do too.
recognition of where we come from matters, and it shapes us even if we don't understand it. But it definitely
Mhm.
becomes an idol, where it's like, oh, I'm 3% indigenous. I'm going to learn all of these rituals and do all of these things. And yeah, it becomes kind of, I don't know.
Perverse.
Um, I was going to say wonky, but maybe it's perverse. I don't know. That's
So
hard for me
like
to say.
I want to get back onto this, like this thing where you felt like I still want to communicate this little thing, right? Because like that's the thing that I meet a lot, especially in women, sometimes also in men. And I always get suspicious, right, when that happens, because it's like, well, like you have this thing and you can't give it words, right? Like how real is it, right? But I'm gonna flip it around and I'm gonna ask you, what would need to happen for you to have felt understood or have felt that you communicated that?
Um, like in this specific situation or just in
Yes,
general?
just well, you can think.
Well, I don't know. And I do like to be understood, but I'm learning more and more. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes the best thing to do is let things lie. But, depending on how much you care about the relationship and you care about the thing you're talking about, sometimes it's worth it to kind of go back and figure that out, because the sense of understanding gets manifested in all these different ways. Sometimes it's a nod. Sometimes it's a, okay, I disagree, but I understand.
Mhm.
um, and sometimes it's a, oh, I have to think about that. And in some ways that almost feels like you're not understood, but in a way it's like, it's at least bridged something closer to understanding, that it's left a question mark in a space for mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I think, women, like, our bodies are designed to grow something into one unit. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's something in our physical nature that is then reflecting this like psychological nature to try and bring things together. I don't know. I think that the spiritual and the
I
physical are
agree,
very
right?
linked.
I agree. Like I think you're correct. But so it's interesting to me when you say, well, this nod or whatever, right? Or like, well, this twitch of your eye, like, and and it, like, I'm not even saying that that's wrong, right?
Hmm.
But like, when I hear that, it's like that's so sensitive for projection,
Hmm.
right? Because like that
Oh, yeah.
twitch in my eye or that nod or whatever, that could have like 15,000 reasons, and like I know because like I've been misunderstood a lot, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Well, and that's why I think ruthless honesty and unconditional, well, maybe abounding grace is very helpful in that process. Because if you twitch your eye and I think, oh, Manuel's mad at me. If I
Mhm,
go, Manuel, are you mad at me? And you go, oh, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm going to believe you because you're ruthlessly honest.
mhm.
But there's some people who they twitch their eye at me and I think, I'm sorry, did I offend you? And they say, oh no, everything's great. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. I go, I believe them the first 3 times. And then
Or
all of a
three,
sudden,
okay.
well, or, however many, but like, let's say the fourth time comes around and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, there is something wrong and they're not being honest. There's nothing I can do about that. Like, all I can do is be as honest as I can with myself, to myself and to others, and then try my best to like be willing to take the honesty of other people because taking honesty is not a comfortable position. That's where the grace comes in. Because, when you say honest things, they sometimes hurt.
I'm sorry.
You've never hurt my feelings, Manuel. I don't think so. Not
I
not that I
haven't.
recall.
Oh
I
my!
mean, maybe.
I need to try hard.
I'm not very easily offended. I can be like, Manuel's being an idiot, but then it's just like, oh, but for me, it's sort of like
An honest idiot. But
yeah, yes, it's like I love to see the best in humanity. So even if I think someone's being silly or um, too dogmatic on something, I try to
Mm,
be as forgiving as I can and go, you know what? I know that they are trying their best to stand for something that they see as beautiful.
mm.
Um, that's like you said, like having that some type of orientation to that is already a good start. Um, but I think, yeah, I think it takes a lot of time and practice to figure out um, how do we then do that well with each other. Um, and yeah,
Well, yeah.
and
What are we even doing, right? Like isn't like that's the step that's often skipped. Um,
mm, mm-hmm,
so to go back to this feeling, right? So like what I heard you say, it's not so much that you're not understood, but it feels more like you're lacking harmony. Does,
maybe that's possible.
but
Um,
that's a big distinction, right? Like that's
yeah,
important because
I agree. Yeah,
because
and
the
like I said, I
solution
don't.
would be completely different, right? Like if you're looking for being understood while you're actually trying to achieve harmony, right? If that's the desire that's beneath it, then the trying to get understood might actually be completely misguided. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
that's the thing that I'm sensing in a lot of women, right? Like they're trying to be understood, right? Or they're trying to find understanding in the other. Well, that's not what they want. Like that's actually not
No,
what they're reaching for.
no, I think you're right. I think we don't want to be necessarily understood or even I mean, maybe heard is a better word, but I really think they want to be listened to.
Well, yeah, but what, like what is the thing that needs listening to? That's the question. Like, because I don't think it's the proposition.
No, probably not. But I think we live in such a world that is obsessed with propositions that we don't know how other ways to manifest it. But I no, I
Mhm.
think we're wanting to be listened to about um, a deeper instinct than propositions, and that is hard to put into words. I think that's why you have that kind of like squirreliness where it's like, oh, I don't think that's quite right, but I don't know how to say it. Like, it's the
Mhm.
most frustrating thing. I totally understand because I frustrate myself with it. Um,
Mhm. Right,
but
but
yeah, it's that tension.
exactly. But do you see that if you propositionalize it, right? There's it takes away from it
Hmm.
immediately, right? And then that proposition also misdirects, right? Because like the information that I have, right, that I have to relate to is the proposition. Like maybe if you're lucky, I can see beyond it, but like that's a high ask, right?
Yeah.
And and so
Yeah.
when you say, well, how do you communicate it, right? Like the immediate answer that I have is vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like like
Yeah.
you don't communicate it, like you redirect. You say like, no, like I gotta process this or whatever. Like you need to be with me on this. Like whatever it is, right? Like it might be even something in me that you need to have me attend to you so that it can get processed in the relationship, right?
Hmm.
But like that do you see what I'm talking about and how that's like completely absent in some sense? or
Yeah.
or when it is present, right? Like because you have this non-violent communication nonsense, right? And like it ends up manifesting in this completely perverted way, right? Like it's just like, oh yeah, you just listen to me say my frustration. It's like, well, like that's not what it's about, right?
Yeah,
Like
but I think part of the perversion is because it's not rightly oriented. Like maybe could it be better situated if it was oriented past the human? Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I don't know enough about it to have a strong opinion on it. But I think there's something true in saying the propositions is not actually where we're getting those answers. It's the actions. And I think that for men and women is really that 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 place where you're going to get trust. And we can look at this. Hmm. Do I want to give examples? I mean, like, you can go to the extremes, right? Like, if a woman hits a man and a man doesn't hit her back, that is a very noble action. And that gives a woman um, at least some sense of trust in the safety of that man. Now, do I think that man should just take the hitting of a woman? No, because I think a woman should understand that it's not her place to hit a man either. Not just because it's unsafe, but because it's not gracious. It's not beautiful,
mhm.
And you learn with motherhood that your actions matter much more than the things you say. Like if you tell your kid, um, you know,
I'll
um,
be there in a bit.
well, yes, that's true. But sort of like if you tell your kid, "Hey, you really need to stop watching so much television," yet you're sitting on the couch watching television, you say, "Go clean the bathroom," but you're just sitting all day on the couch watching YouTube. Do you think they're
Mhm.
really going to take that in? No, they're going to feel slighted. It's like, well, why am I your serf off to do the bathrooms while you just sit there? Now, obviously, there's like that's like an extreme example, but like I think that's why I think there's an importance in entering into the learning with your kids. Like when
Mhm.
you play with your kid, you you got to get on the ground with them and you got to be there. When we take communion, I take it first and then she takes it because she sees me and then she does. If I want
Mhm.
my kid to go to confession, I better go to confession. If I tell her this is good, you should do it. I better at least be trying to do that. I might fail at it, but I should at least be trying to do that if I'm going to give my kid a dictate.
And actually, like I think showing your kids that you fail is actually underappreciated.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
also important.
But there's this sense of like parenthood where um I think parents put this undue pressure on themselves that they have to be perfect or their kids are going to uh, walk down bad paths.
Hmm.
And I don't think that is true. I think we should be moving towards holiness and righteousness and like beauty, goodness, truth as best as we can. But sometimes that beauty comes from saying, oh, I failed, I'm going to try again. Because then they are more willing to say, oh, I failed, I'm going to try again. And kids are resilient at that. They're the best at trying again. They have this unbounding patience that, I wish I still had in many ways.
Yeah. So you you were as questioning the role of the higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
In um, resolving this, and like I think, at
Mm-hmm.
least for me, like the reason why all these women like they like I just get frustrated is because I can't appeal to the higher.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Well, God is a woman, right? We are God, right? And
no, no, God is non-binary. But like,
yeah, I'm sorry, just not man. But anyways, to not make too much fun of it, I don't want to poke too much fun of it, but like to and there is truth that there is something divine about the feminine, just as there is something divine about the masculine, and you see that in Orthodoxy, where you have Christ, but you also have Mary, the Christ bearer, and these are two parts of a whole, and understanding the fullness of the divine. And in Christianity, there's this belief that we are the image of God. So there is something divine in us, but we aren't divine on our own. It's in orientation with that thing higher. And so we should be working our whole lives to get to that thing higher. But if you are already the highest of the high, um, it can be whatever it can be. But women and men know that they're not the highest because even when they say, I love myself exactly how I am, they hate themselves when they eat the whole bag of crisps and like, oh, I said I wasn't going to do that, but I ate the whole bag of crisps and I hate it. Or you didn't go out and do that
no,
workout,
it was
or
the
you didn't
fault
call that
of
friend.
the company that made that so appealing to you, so that like no, but that's the answers that you generate, right? Because if there's no higher, right, like there's these other human malicious forces that end up manipulating you into not being divine. Because
Mhm.
where else is it coming from if you're divine? Like, and
Yeah.
again, right? Like me as in a conflict. Like if I can't appeal to the higher, like now I am dependent upon like literally what wind is blowing in your mind,
Yeah.
whether we can get along. And it's like, well, like that's not okay. Like,
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't really factor in the idea that there is also a force in the world that hates humans and wants to see them destroyed and are using these accusatory patterns to destroy ourselves and stop us from looking to the higher. We dismiss both the good and the evil, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of a battle and being afflicted by these um, spirits, these patterns, these like forces, whatever you want to call it, and um, we're so helpless to it because we just won't even acknowledge its existence.
well,
It's
I think
terrifying.
that's well, I think that's the luxury, right? So
Mm,
like
it
when
is a
when
luxury.
when I look this at this Chinese show, it's like, oh my god, it's intense. Like there's so many people dying in all sorts of ways, right? And like there's just no room for error. Like everything has direct feedback. Like the human element, right? Like Like there's the law, and like you're gonna get owned by it. Like and like sometimes like you know someone in a higher up position, but there was plenty of scenes where the guy in a higher up position says like I know like I want to help you, but like if I help you I get screwed, so like I'm just gonna have to screw you like
Mhm.
because like you broke the law.
Mhm.
And that was a given. And so like there was a security, right? Like there was a security in the sense that there was a shared reality. And like we don't have that anymore. Like
Yeah.
that sharedness is completely gone. And then we try to
Well,
reestablish that, right? And then we get bubbles.
I don't think it's completely gone because there's still churches moving towards it every day. Is it not? It's not the forefront of our cultural news. But if you put that aside for a while and really try to like focus in on a community that is trying their best to move towards those things as best as you can see it, all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's not dead. Nobody nobody really wants to acknowledge it because it's weird. Like it's weird to say, like why we've we've gotten so culturally used to the idea that miracles can't happen that it's weird to say I believe in a dying and rising Messiah, even though most of us have had some spiritual experience or some supernatural thing that we can't explain happen to us. And if not us ourselves, you ask enough people, they'll tell you, even if they don't fall into a religious tradition. And like I found this to be very true when I worked in entertainment and comedy. Almost none of those people were religiously oriented, but a lot of them believed in some sort of spirituality, new age, tarot cards, whatever. But a lot of them too had this belief that, oh, I've seen a ghost. Even the hardcore atheists, like, oh no, miracles can't happen, but I've seen a ghost. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. What's happening there? And I
Well,
think that, yeah, I don't know. I think the curiosity of that question, I try to foster first in myself before I try to foster and see if we can figure out what's happening on the other side of the veil, if you will.
yeah. So like I've seen. I was listening to a guy who was talking about ayahuasca, and he was basically talking about networks of basically intelligibility,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, like that's a way that you can frame these things, right? But
Mhm.
like what does ayahuasca do, right? Like, well, it opens the door, or it gives you circuits that you can plug into aspects of reality, right? Like that's the analogies that they're using. And And like, why is this all an issue? Well, like I think it's all an issue because we're not cultivating relationality, right? Like
Mhm.
if you don't have a good sense of the masculine and the feminine and how they have communion, right? Like if you don't have a framework to intelligize whatever experience that you're having, right? Because like
Mhm.
I'm reading language of creation
Mhm.
again in a book club now, and it's really profound to me to see how these yeah, like these, there's a participatory element in this symbolic structure. And like
Mhm.
like when I enact the masculine, right, like I now have a sense of what that means, right, because I've been looking at the world through the lens of that for a long time. When I see the feminine or enact the feminine, like I also have a sense of what that means. But like that took me a long time, right? Like
Mhm.
it took me work. And it's like, well, if you don't
Yeah.
have these categories, right, like in relationality, not in propositions, but like in actual relation, you don't have these categories to interface with the world. Like the well, like we're talking about having an enchanted world, right? Like
Mhm.
it's just it got sucked, all the air got sucked out of it, and it's like flat, rimpled, and then you take your drug, or you have your experience, right, and you have like this one shootout, like completely out of anything that makes sense to you, right? And then, well, you'll explain it with elves or aliens or whatever framework that that allows you to get some grasp on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, there's not only just the loss of the orientation of masculine and feminine, but the spiritual in general. And masculine and feminine have a lot to do with spiritual, in ways that I think, even if we feel we start to understand those categories, are just, they're way deeper than we ever recognize. If we think we've mapped the territory on the masculine and feminine, well, that's the minute we're wrong, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this beauty though that like we slowly learn how to do that, um, by having conversations not only within the genders but like across borders. Like I think we together, not only through the propositions that we're talking about or learning about the masculine and feminine from each other, but the ways in which we're moving in the conversation that we're not speaking about, that we probably don't even fully notice, like is teaching us something too. And that's really interesting, beautiful thing. And it's that, yeah, I think that's where like the willingness to be slow in that process can be really helpful. And that's sort of like that masculine sense of like, if I can be strong and I can be a structure and I can be steady, it helps in that slow process in allowing that to like reveal what needs to be revealed.
Right. 'Cause, yeah. Like, do you have the sense that you want to do 15 things at once?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
not always.
And like, do you have the sense of how structure influences that? Like, do you have experience with that?
I um I would not say I'm a naturally structured person, but because of how sort of fluid I can be, I realize how important structure is. You just learn that. And that's the thing. I think a lot of these women who are kind of going on these extremes, they're going to learn very well the beauty of structure, because when it fails and you don't have it, it's like, oh, it's a mess. And
I don't
even when you
like
do have it and you fail, it can be a real mess.
like I like your hope, right? I was like, ideally that should happen, but my okay, so maybe this is where I want to like finish this all into.
Yeah, land the plane.
I I have this idea, right, like that I offer women help, like men too, and like men also have issues with accepting help, but for
Hmm.
women it's way worse in whatever, because then they have to accept my authority, right?
Hmm.
And I think women
Or
don't even know what it means to accept help. Like
yeah, well, I think for anybody it's hard to accept help, but I think
yeah,
especially women too, because we have this sort of, yeah, because there is this sort of stubbornness of like, I can do it without you. I don't need this man. I don't need anybody. But you do
right.
need people. You totally need people. It's all coming from a jaded place. But like, there's something I think maybe is good. Is like maybe as women, um, we don't ask for help unless we actually want it. Like maybe that's something we can move towards, because I think a lot of times, we ask for help because, um, well, sometimes we're just
Well,
being patronizing. We're just like, "Oh, can you help me? I'm poor and I'm weak." And I
I
think,
don't think
no, I think that, it's a great flirting tactic. Make a man feel real strong and say, "Oh, I can't do anything." Um, I'm somewhat joking, but like, there's certainly that pattern that we can fall into, and then there's a pattern of like we want to complain and say, "Oh, all this stuff," and the man goes, "Okay, well, let me help you fix it," but we don't want you to fix it. We just want to be heard, right? And it's like, maybe we should stop that. I don't know. Like, I think there's times and places, but I think also for men too. My dad, my dad learned this trick. My mother is a venter, and so she'll say lots of things, and he kind of goes, "Okay, Do you want me to fix this situation or you just want me to listen? Because when they just say, I just want you to listen, you go, okay, great. And so you just sit there. And like, I think that sometimes sitting there and complaining is just so unhelpful to anybody, like whether it's to a man or a woman. And so, like, learning how to curb that, I think, is going to be really important for both sexes. But
But
there,
what is that, right? Like, what is complaining? It's just unwillingness to be vulnerable.
hmm. Or it could also potentially be the strife you feel when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, and that sort of like fight against
Mm.
it. Because sometimes you can be
Yeah,
you
well, yeah,
like you're
yeah.
vulnerable and you're complaining about it, but you're like, I'm gonna keep going, you're just complaining. But it's
Mhm.
because you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable and you're feeling this strife and you don't like it.
Right, well, but the point is that it's always looking away, right? Like it's a distraction from the vulnerability. Like I get that
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
coping to like it's a coping to the vulnerability forcing itself upon you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Well,
because
and so I feel like sometimes like we're only as strong as that cope, you know? Like we'd like to believe we're the strongest ever, but sometimes it's like we've been limited to that cope, and like you just have to kind of wrestle with that. But that doesn't mean that we can't, when we get out of that, find ways to move to something higher. But like, yeah, I think you're right. If we don't put God back in the picture, it all becomes kind of nonsense. It all becomes wishy-washy, and then it really doesn't matter what you do. But we know that that's not true, because every time we feel offended, we feel like we've been something is not in the right order.
so yeah, so like I don't know, like I feel like this element of vulnerability and allowing it to be right.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know, like I guess I'm always looking for the masculine role in that, right? Like, okay,
mm,
so like, because okay, like maybe it's articulating it this way, right? It's like, so if the masculine role is in um, making things happen, right, in some sense, then it's completely opposite, right? In the sense like if you're having an emotion or you're working through something, right? Like I need to do the opposite of making things happen.
yeah, I mean, it's because it's interesting when you frame it in vulnerability, it all of a sudden makes you realize that the traditional forms of masculine and feminine vulnerability tend towards what most people imagine as masculine and feminine. And you can kind of look at these extremes of like the different ways that we go to battle. Men go to war, women give birth. These are our battlefields, and we fight them, and they're vulnerable in totally different ways. But in the modern sense, and probably even in ancient senses, there's also a requirement that sometimes to be vulnerable, it means women have to go into the workplace and take on men's roles. And men sometimes have to tell their wife, I feel weak. And that's not the kind of vulnerability men and women want. And that's what we learn from each other, right? Women, we know we're weak. We try to fight that, but we know that we're weak. And so we get better at saying, I'm weak, or it can come a little bit more naturally to us. But I don't always
Like
think
not
that's
even saying it, but like just like once a month,
being.
right? Like you have to change gears, right? So you're used to changing gears, right? And like men don't change gears that much. They're
Yeah.
just like
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm an outlier. I don't think the cycle that women go through changes my gears that much. I don't think much changes, but I also don't have a lot of aches and pains that come with that some other women do. But I don't know. I always it's hard to know too, because you can't ever know except what you live through. Are women complaining about something that's not that bad because they they
well,
don't want to
it's
be
even
vulnerable, or
worse, right? It's like where's your attention? right? Like there's
Mhm.
been plenty of
Mhm.
experiments where like people sniff things with hormones on them, and like they relate to the world differently afterwards, right?
Mhm.
And so like we're affected in completely different ways. Like I can tell you, like when I was younger, I was getting stoned, and at a certain point, I was like, why am I doing this? Like, like what am I actually doing here? So
Mhm.
I was like, I'll stop for a month, and I'll just do all the things that I used to do, and just not get stoned. And I was like, well, there's no difference. But like, and yes, that's true, right? Like at some level, there's no difference, but at another level, it's completely different,
Mhm.
right? And so it's really hard for us to reflect on ourselves and our participation because we're in it, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
we're in the weather. So it's like, yes, I'm reacting to the weather, but it's like, yes, but it could be different weather. Like the
Yeah.
weather
Well,
is the
and
issue.
I think that's why we need each other, because sometimes we can see something you can see something being outside of myself that I couldn't see. And maybe it's a miscommunication. Maybe it's a misread. But you can't know until the time shows it. But yeah, I think whatever the case is, there is a truth that men and women need to find a better path forward to working with each other. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. Can
All right.
confirm.
Well, any last thoughts before we kind of land the plane? This was good, I think.
Yeah, no, like I feel like if we're talking about things, right? Um, it's well, I did a couple things, right? It's like, okay, like there's something happening inside of you, right? And it's like, well, like
Mhm.
at some sense, it doesn't even matter how valid it is, right? Like what matters is that I need to do something with it, right?
Yeah.
And and how do we get to the point where we loosen ourselves away from the experience of like, oh, I'm dealing with this, right? Like the
Mhm.
complaining aspect that you were talking about, and we get into the thing is like, okay, like how can we commune around this so it can get resolved,
Mhm.
whatever that means, right? And like we need to find a completely different flavor of being, and like this goes back to the intimacy crisis, because that does require intimacy, right? Like that does require me to see the twinkling in your eyes, and then s- changing changing course as a consequence, independent of whether what I saw was correct or not. Like I still
Yeah.
need to do it to allow the right thing to happen, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, and this I think too points again to this higher, because what helps us to do that between individuals and humans is by allowing ourselves to enter into intimacy with the thing that's higher than us, because at least Christianity, it's a relational being. And so it's like, if we can learn how to start with that relational being, then maybe it opens up the door that we can do it with others. But it's sort of that two sides of the same coin. But by trying that pattern with others in the way that we can understand it, it also opens that up for that higher thing. But you can't,
yeah,
you have to acknowledge the higher thing. It's just not going to work if you don't acknowledge it.
yeah, well, we're in agreement.
Okay, great. It's lovely to
So
be agree with you, Manuel. I do not want to be on your bad side. I will say that for sure. All right. Well, thanks for having conversation with me. It was really lovely.
yeah, well, thanks for everybody for watching, and well, maybe we'll talk again if there's a lot
Yeah,
of
we definitely
common.
should. We definitely should. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I will close with a serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.